Hello. So today I'm interviewing Daniel Jiwoong M. He's a graduate from the Montreal Institute for Learning Algorithms, which is Yashua Benjia's lab. And he is now the CEO of a new AI startup. Uh, First in the interview, we're going to talk about that startup. Then we'll talk about the state of NLP and deep learning. Finally, we're going to discuss reinforcement learning in NLP, and generative models will probably come up at some point as well. So the first question I have is, can you give an overview of what your startup called AI Founded is and what it does?
Sure. So AI Founded is obviously an AI tech company, and we are based in Toronto. And we provide a search engine platform where you can train your AI agents to access information from internet. So our target audiences are not the human users, not you, but AI users. And we license search engine to academic researchers and developers. So basically, AI industry, and we also plan to license our own AI agents for making information retrieval applications.
I see. So, what does Google kind of offer in this space, and what do you think like their plans are like for this area?
I'm not aware of what Google is doing. Like they haven't publicly announced what they're doing, but I imagine they're also doing some sort of similar way direction as what we do, but do it internally.
Mhm.
Whereas what we try to do is we also want to try to share our platform and service to out there other developers so that they can also work with the search engine as well.
I see. So, what are your plans and major goals for AI Founded right now?
So I'll say that many people envision ourselves interacting with AI in the future as part of day-to-day life. And also this is what AI Founded envisions too. So our aim is to build an AI agent that can represent all the information or all kinds of informations around the world. And the first step towards that was to build a search engine for us, which give us a lot of information around the world, what's going on around the world. And probably our next step is to figure out how to represent them and make good use of them. Yeah.
I see. Do you plan to publish research or focus on getting out a product? Or are you kind of thinking about blending both?
I kind of plan to do both, blending both, where so we doing research allows the company to really get state-of-art technology and have a unique solution so we can stay competitive, I'll say.
Yeah.
As our platform side our platform is being used by researchers and developers, and we are currently focusing on user experience and having additional functionalities and so on.
Yeah.
We are also focusing a lot on our product side as well. And for that, we are also giving free API keys to university labs
I
to
see.
help their research projects through our platform.
Yeah.
Currently, New York University and University of Montreal are using it.
Yeah.
So yeah, also if you're also a student who are interested in using this, then feel free to email me actually.
Okay. Was the decision to kind of decide to focus more on product or more on research, was that sort of a difficult decision, or like what went into making that decision?
For me, it was a natural decision for me because, well, I was a researcher and I'm still a researcher, and I like doing research and I do research. So that's how I think how to do research, how to solve some problem that's out there and how to improve stuff.
Yeah.
So this is something that I also found. So every time when we try to attack a problem, I sort of somehow tackle it from similar way as how I do research, I guess.
I see.
Yeah.
How would your search engine and the associated API be better suited for machine learning researchers than the Google API?
Okay, so at the moment, our search engine API is, I think, no better or worse than Google API for machine learning research, integrating to machine learning models.
I see. Do you just mean for that? Do you just mean the quality of the results themselves?
Or the functionality we offer right now, because we
Okay.
just use our alpha version. But
Yeah.
for the few things that are different is that Google API has a maximum number of query limits per day.
Yeah.
And the pricing metric is not designed for the purpose of training machine learning models. So the metric itself is a little bit for other purpose.
That's interesting.
Right, because they like all like search engine companies, when they release their API metric,
Yeah.
it was for the purpose of other like development, the software development and so on, right? It wasn't that their intention wasn't to, so we're gonna use this to train machine learning models. No, it wasn't that, right? But going onwards, we plan to customize our search engine towards working with machine learning models more.
I see. What would be an example? So are you thinking that maybe the results that you return could be more optimized so that they'd be good for a machine learning model versus being good for like an actual person to see? Or are you also talking about just how the API is written?
I think it can be both. From the API perspective, like we can provide tools that really helps the developers job.
Yeah.
And or as well, but also we can also think about ways to give a results that makes more sense for machine learning models, because the results that shows out there right now are they're all heuristics, but heuristic method of ranking, but they're more towards us humans, right?
Yeah, I could see that. So what do you think about the AI startup scene? And also, do you think that we're going to continue to see successful deep learning startups?
Yes. Wait. So I don't know much about startup scenes outside of Toronto and Montreal.
I see.
But AI startup scene in Toronto and Montreal is getting stronger.
Right.
Just like. Mm-hmm.
Why did you decide to start your startup in Toronto?
Oh, okay. So I decided to start here in Toronto because this is where I grew up, and this is where I'm comfortable, and I have a lot of friends, and I can help. I can reach out for help.
I see.
People, because I know people a lot here.
Yeah.
So that's the main reason. The comfortness, so where I can actually be comfortable and working.
Right. And I guess you also have the University of Toronto there.
Yes, that's right.
You have this new, I guess, Vector Institute, which has some good people. And then also, it's not that far from Montreal.
Yeah, I usually visit Montreal like every month or something. So so it's quite nice. It's close to Montreal.
I see.
Yeah. So Montreal and Toronto, I mean, they have a very similar startup scene, I guess.
Yeah. Well,
no. But
I kind of imagine they'd be pretty different.
Well, from like the perspective that I had was like they have both a lot of like founder development initiatives, like incubators.
Yeah.
Their VC size are about the same. They both get they both gets benefit from Canadian governments, because
Right.
Canadian governments has a lot of supports
Right.
for recruiting talented people from abroad, and
Yeah,
we also have a lot of grants and tax reduction for early startup companies.
that's good.
But I would say that in order to have a good grounding for early startups in Toronto and Montreal, they need more robust private investors, like
Yeah,
angel investors,
right.
for sure.
Is there anything about the startup scene or AI startups
Mhm.
that really surprised you since you got into it, or something that you didn't expect?
So when I got into
It would
startup,
be impressive if the answer were no.
well, I don't know, but what I found was like whenever I talked to a lot of like other startups,
Yeah,
I found is that it's not I'm not speaking for every startup, but
yeah,
these startups have their own original goal,
yeah,
and suddenly like or not maybe not suddenly, but they want to somehow equip deep learning somehow to their original goal.
yeah,
And sometimes I feel like it feels awkward or not natural fit because they had but because of the like deep learning or AI hype, they suddenly want to equip like this tool to their
yeah.
so it feels unnatural some of them. But I would say is the ones that succeed, um, I'm guessing that they really know like where deep learning really suits the best,
Yeah.
and you have to be able to distinguish what it can do and what it cannot do given
Yeah.
the budget of time.
So
Because
you're saying there are a lot of people who are specialists in a certain application area, or they're interested in like a specific business problem, and they have the idea that they can use neural nets for it, but they don't have like a detailed or thoughtful technical vision.
yes, and because for especially for early startups, you have a runway, you have a timeline, budget of timeline, right? So
Right.
you need to figure out, it's really important to figure out whether, like, estimate the time of can you make this happen within this amount of time or not. That's really vital for the like startup company, right?
Right.
So
Uh, So, do you think that we're going to see a shift towards deep learning startups that are less research oriented and more oriented around a specific application?
Uh, yeah, I assume, yeah, I think so. So a lot of big companies like tech giants are already dominating research field, like especially in deep learning, because we see
Yeah,
like Google Brain, Fair, DeepMind, and so on.
right.
But I think startups also have a good chance of making their marks for solving specific domain applications.
Yeah,
Because I imagine like even if the company is really big, creating a team from scratch for a new specific domain is very
yeah.
costly and time consuming.
And
So
there's also no guarantee that it'll work.
right. So I think they only pick out the ones that they think they're important.
Yeah,
This means that there's a lot of chances for other startups to provide a unique solutions.
right. So, if you look at a startup like DeepMind,
Hmm.
where they mostly, I guess, focused on research and demos,
Hmm.
uh, to my knowledge, entirely focused on research and demos before they were bought. Do you think we could have something like that again, uh, that would get bought by a big company? I mean, I guess Nirvana is kind of like that too. Or do you think all of the startups that we're going to see in the future will be really tailored around like a specific application or product?
No, I think it's possible, but you just need to like really have a good idea and something like really groundbreaking things, you
Yeah,
know. Because something that's we got used to a lot of things that's we can imagine a lot of stuff like what we can do with deep learning, deep neural network, or deep reinforcement network. Because we saw many applications come out of the from the research and companies. So
yeah,
that's something very creative and innovative, I think.
I see. One of the things that you mention on your startup AI Founded's website
Hmm.
is that you're interested in the idea that if neural networks could access the internet for the task that they're solving, that they could get away with storing a lot less knowledge in their parameters.
Mm-hmm.
Could you maybe go into like some cases where you think that would be valuable?
Yeah. So for sure. So there's multiple points to make here, I think. So right now we see a lot of neural network working great for very specific tasks and even hard tasks like game Go. But
Yeah,
we haven't seen much we haven't heard of much success on solving multitask problems.
yeah,
And you can imagine that like there's enormous information when you try to consider multiple domains or multiple vendors. And so there's 3 points to make here. So first, um, it's really hard to learn or represent all of this information using like neural network with the finite parameters.
yeah,
Two, it is even hard for us to make a data set that covers all these kind of informations.
yeah,
Even hard to come up with the data set. But third, also, even as a humans, we have hard time learning or remembering, storing all the knowledges. But we tend to rely on external sources like internet and books. So
yeah,
why I think that similarly, if we can have neural network learn to browse, and then this is very a wise idea, and this is what I found is trying to achieve. Yeah.
yeah. If we're going to have neural nets which take advantage of interacting with the internet, do you think that reinforcement learning is going to be the dominant paradigm for this? And if so, what kinds of reward signals do you see being used in practice?
Okay, so I think we should leverage supervised, unsupervised, and reinforcement learning all. So
Yeah.
RL seems to be natural paradigm that comes to mind as well.
One of the interesting things in this area to me is that it seems like model-based reinforcement learning seems to be quite a bad idea in this setting, since the model would need to incorporate all of the knowledge contained in the search engine, I think. So if you have a model which tries to capture the conditional distribution of the state one step in the future conditioned on the current state and the current action, then if the current action is the search query that you're taking, to be able to predict the next state ahead, you'd have to capture what the search engine does inside of the model's parameters, which seems to be defeating the point. Whereas when I think about something like an actor critic, it seems like your model could learn that certain queries would tend to give good results without actually being able to predict what the result for a given query is. Oh yeah, that's not really a question, but
I see. Well, yeah, I agree that I don't know until I try out both model free and model based and
yeah.
but I do agree that model free seems like natural approach, and I would try that way first because it's easier to try model free ones.
Right. But do you think if people start to use reinforcement learning a lot in this setting, do you think that it's going to encourage us to focus on different types of problems in reinforcement learning, or do you think it's going to suggest new research directions in reinforcement learning algorithms?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, so this is like I would say this is one challenging problem, one of the challenging problem, learning to browse and search and use information. And
Yeah.
usually, like reinforcement learning, we get very sparse rewards, especially at the beginning, and it's very hard problem. So I think that people may come up with different tactics, different ways of tackling it once they actually try it out. So, and I think this will create another like domain of the problem, application problems for reinforcement learning research community.
It actually seems to me like here the rewards potentially are a lot less sparse than what you might usually get in reinforcement learning. So to give one example, let's say you're trying to build a language model. So maybe your reward is like the likelihood of that language model. And the action that your model can take is both producing a word in the language model, as well as calling this search engine. So, for example, if your language model encounters a word that it's never seen before, it could run a search query on that word or something about that word, and then it can use the results of that query to keep on writing. But since the reward is just how well the language model is doing, you're getting rewards on every single step. It seems to me like if you're doing reinforcement learning setting in this kind of setting, maybe it just has different properties. So it would suggest research into different types of algorithms. But maybe once people start using it, they'll see more directions for things to develop.
Yeah, I mean, so like this is for a specific example where you're thinking of doing language modeling using
search
engine. Right. So yeah, maybe for that specific task, yes, but there could be many different tasks. So yeah, I would say so, definitely.
Before you created the startup, or maybe when you had the initial idea, was there any particular application of something like this that got you really excited, or was there any kind of example that you fixated on when you were developing it?
Yes, so I thought, for example, yeah, definitely language modeling is one. Yeah. And question and answering, I thought, is another one. And chatbot is another one, too.
I see.
So those type of applications are like, I thought it would be like natural fit for using our search engine platform.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of interesting with QA. I guess usually you get a reference text that goes along with the question, but here you could consider like a free-form Q&A where you can just search for whatever
right
you want.
Yeah, for sure, because as the questions get harder and more complex, you might need more passage than what they provide, more passage than they provide, So it'll be natural.
One thing that I'm interested in is how do you think that the use of search engines within neural networks would affect the reproducibility of research? And to me, it seems like reproducibility could end up being completely destroyed in this setting.
Well, are you thinking that because the environment is stochastic, or is it because, or no? Or
so the stochasticity I don't think that would be that bad. What I'm more thinking is we're running on this search engine. That search engine is going to keep changing over time because you're going to keep updating it. I mean, you could hypothetically imagine something where like there's different snapshots of how the search engine runs that you could save at different points. But it seems like kind of a lot of engineering effort to maintain those because I'm just saying, like, if I publish a paper and I get a certain result on this data set and the model is calling a search engine and someone just runs the same method like 6 months later, they could get totally different results. Like maybe they just keep getting better results, which I guess is what researchers want, but not really.
Yeah, totally. Usually production level search engines get constantly updated with the new indexes.
Yeah.
So for that setting, reproducibility is hard.
Yeah.
But what you said, like if we have a separate version where it stays as the same, or for specific or specific area of or domain of contents, then maybe you can still use it to reproduce the work, I guess.
Would you keep like a snapshot every year, maybe, or something like that? Or you also mentioned something like a snapshot, but only for a specific area.
I think that's possible for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, but I could also see the engineering getting very tricky there. Like if you imagine your old version of the search engine uses some specific algorithm, or it uses like a specific type of database, and then you say, okay, in the new version, we're cutting out this algorithm, or we're cutting out this database, and then having to maintain like a few versions of your search engine is very I mean, it's potentially a pretty large engineering burden, which doesn't mean you can't do it. But I remember when I worked in industry, we had stuff where we would train these models over several years of data, and you could get really nasty engineering problems where like the way a certain type of data is defined changes over time, and it's very hard to get this like consistent training set over time, or it's hard to like talk about different pieces of data existing at different points in time. Because if you're just like if you just want to run a search engine, it seems to me like it's easier to maintain the newest version. But I don't know. I mean, it's possible that that's just an engineering problem that can be solved.
I don't know. I think it's doable. I don't know why not. Like once you have some kind of ranking algorithms
Yeah.
and then you have that snapshot of it, and then you can just store it, and then you use that as
It's just like, yeah, I guess it becomes like a fixed piece of software and data. Okay.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah. So you just run that like ranking algorithm once, and then you get all the results.
Yeah.
And you just save it over time.
I see.
Yeah.
Do you think that in addition to search engines improving the capabilities of neural networks, the same neural networks could in turn improve the search engine, for example, by providing feedback on which answers turn out to be useful?
Yeah, definitely. There are many subcomponents that we can consider using neural network. Machine learning methods has been already explored a lot in search engine community, like since 10 years of, I think. There weren't just neural network. There were like SVMs or like clustering algorithms like LDA and stuff like that.
Right.
But every search engine companies use their own like ranking algorithms, right? And
Right.
but they are all heuristic method eventually, because there is no way to figure out what's the best right answer, and it's really hard to evaluate what is better than another one. So everything's heuristics, I would say.
Right. Well, I guess you get some feedback from what the user's behavior is, but and I don't know too much about this area, but I've heard in some talks they say that for various search queries, if you just make one of the top results like a picture of like an attractive person, it'll get a lot of clicks. But you don't want to have a search engine where you search for, deep learning and you get a picture of a random celebrity.
Yeah.
So using those individual level cues could be kind of tricky. And then I also imagine they do A/B testing, and then they look at like aggregate statistics.
Yeah. I mean,
that's also tricky.
Well, you can do those, but in the end, I think that like it can vary based on your perspective and what you value more and type of stuff. Whether you want your search to be more biased towards something that's more relevant to something because you're interested in, then you're finding that results will be better. Or you want more like unbiased, like covers very broad topics and so on.
Right. Although it seems like maybe the value function that you get from the reinforcement learning algorithms that are running with your search engine could be a useful cue.
Yeah, right. So for I think coming back to the before the question where um, how to make the search engine results better for machine learning. I think it's good if it's unbiased because if it's biased, then the reward will the model will train because the model it will affect the model when it trains.
Mm-hmm.
So it's better if I think it's better if it covers broad topics. Like when you search Michael Jordan, like I tend to look for statistician Michael Jordan, but maybe someone else may look for basketball Michael Jordan, and we want both.
Right. Moving on to the next subject in the interview, what do you think about progress in generative models? And do you have any thoughts on the challenge of quantitatively evaluating generative models?
Okay. So yeah, I worked on a lot of generative models from RVMs to now these days like tweaking GANs, and I think GANs are like very popular these days, and
Yeah.
they're like cool because like before we're used to using log likelihood based objectives,
Yeah.
but GANs really opened up exploring different metrics. And
Yeah.
this is fascinating. But I'll say that though, like for example, a few years ago, we focused on having a good representation and then doing how to do good inference, especially in deep
Yeah.
model community. But these days, we tend to focus more on generating good samples. And
Mhm.
from this, we do see a lot of applications like um, generating super resolution images or doing pix-to-pix stuff.
Yeah.
But I think both generation and inferences are important. So and I feel like we do need to still focus on inference problems as
I
well.
see.
But yeah. But going back to your second question was about evaluation of generative models.
Yeah.
Before we were using a lot of log likelihoods based of testing as an evaluation.
Right.
But going onwards, I think depending on perspective, we will realize that there's going to be many different ways of quantitatively evaluating generative models, and this depends on like what you want to emphasize and what your perspective is, and depending on that, you have different metric that's more suitable. You
But it
know,
seems pretty hard to find any reasonably good quantitative metric for GANs. I mean, as far as I can tell, one thing is doing semi-supervised learning, but uh, that has significant issues in that you could imagine something that doesn't do generation well at all, that's still good for semi-supervised learning.
I see.
The other thing that I guess I see people doing is you take some kind of model which have a way of computing likelihood in that model, and then you train it adversarially using another discriminator. So professor forcing is like that. And then there's also a paper on uh, Laurent Din's, I want to say, real MVP, the change of variables thing, where they also add a discriminator on top and train it adversarially.
Yeah.
And a few months ago, I was looking into doing something where you train a deep Boltzmann machine adversarially. Like you kind of run the block Gibbs chain, and then you kind of adversarially try to uh, make the clamped and unclamped phase match.
That's interesting. Oh,
That was hard to make. It was hard to get that working, but if you could do that, you could evaluate the log likelihood under the energy-based model. But
uh,
actually, even with energy-based models, I guess you can evaluate likelihood, but it's not easy.
yeah. I'm very interested in like this topic too, evaluation model, and that's one of the things I'm also working on the side.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe hopefully you'll see something come out in a few months.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
One thing is, over the years, you've done a good amount of work on autoencoders, and overall reconstruction losses are pretty unpopular these days. Maybe the cycle GAN would be one exception, the thing that turns the horses into zebras. What do you think that today's generative modeling researchers can take from the older autoencoder research? And do you think that there's a direction that's kind of underexplored right now?
Right. So, well, in terms of like reconstruction error loss,
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether that, I don't know if that's a good loss function or not these days. Like with GANs, we can basically learn the loss function by training discriminator. But maybe the takeaway could be that, but autoencoder, when we trained, we looked at the hidden representation, compact hidden or over complete hidden representation, and then we used to work with a lot of those to applying for doing semi-supervised or fine tuning and stuff like that. So maybe along that line, maybe we can make good use of it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean. So you're saying the idea of inferring a latent representation?
Again, yeah, it's again about the inference and inference on latent representations. I think we need to emphasize that more these days because we tend to forget about that. There are a few models like Ali, bidirectional GANs type of thing.
Yeah.
But I don't see many people using it or doing research on that more. Yeah.
Right. So kind of moving in another direction, what do you think of NLP research right now, and what directions do you find to be the most interesting?
For me, obviously, question and answering, text generation, text summarization, those are interesting applications for me.
Mm-hmm.
I heard that these days a lot of NLP researchers started working on multitask learning.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's becoming one of the hot things.
Yeah.
Besides that, I think we still have problems dealing with rare words representations, vocabulary size, word level, character level, good representation. Those are always, I think, thing that we always should try to improve on.
Mm-hmm.
But I think also another fascinating topic is how to learn to do grounding, how to solve grounding, tackle grounding.
Mm-hmm.
So, and people try to do it different way,
So what is the grounding problem?
Oh, so what is the grounding problem?
Yeah.
I would say for example, I'll give you an example where this is my favorite one. So, describe me what yellow is. How do you describe yellow?
Colors are always tricky to describe. I'd probably just say that it's one of the primary colors, and then I could list things are yellow, and I mean,
yeah, it's very hard. So
yeah.
We need to when we explain yellow, we need to show example and few maybe at different lining conditions and at different setting, and we show that this is yellow and we get it, right?
Yeah.
We get it somehow we get it inside, but we don't know how to explain it. I think those are good.
So what you're saying is many aspects of language which kind of make sense when you can connect them to the world outside of language, but if your whole world is just language, it's hard to get at what they really mean.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So because when it's only language and it's a symbols, then only it becomes a statistical, frequency-based probabilistic models, basically. Yeah.
To me, it seems like one of the interesting things with language is we're usually interested in natural language, so it's things that a person produces, but and a person can interpret. But when you have a machine learning system, because it runs on a computer, it's easier for it to interact with computers when you're making your updates and your training and evaluating and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, like if you're training an algorithm to run on video games, you can just run a video game emulator on your computer.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're doing stuff with natural language, and you're trying to do something very novel with natural language, it seems like it's difficult to evaluate how well you've done it unless you're really going towards just modeling data that already exists.
Yeah. That's right. So I would say that maybe one thing I need to add on the list of NLP research topic is what's the good evaluation metric, because we use Blue Score right now, right?
Yeah, or
And,
like likelihood,
sorry?
or like likelihood.
Yeah, likelihood. Well, for example, when we use Blue Score, I think it has some limitations, and because of this evaluation metric limitation, it's hard
Yeah.
for us to improve our model. Like we need better evaluation metric to really improve so that we can improve our methods. You know what I mean?
I do see what you mean.
Yeah.
So do you see a lot of promise in NLP research moving into using language more as a means towards an end? Like you have an agent that has to use language to accomplish a different task, or it has to communicate with other agents, versus modeling language data that just exists.
Could you explain more a little bit more?
So like you could imagine there's a game where two agents can communicate with each other using language, like they can just write whatever they want to each other, and their reward signal would be something like winning the game, and they can write anything that they want to each other.
Right.
And this introduces a problem where they could communicate in a way that's just like totally unintelligible to humans if you're just telling them they can kind of make up any language.
Right.
Well, so actually, I guess if you had some labeled data of how humans would communicate in the game, and you kind of pulled those distributions together to some extent, you could make it so that they learn to communicate with the same sort of language that humans use, but they could still learn to use language in a novel way.
Yeah, I get it. I get what you mean. Yeah, you're right. So if they learn to communicate in their own representation, it could be like good for between the models, like AI models.
Right.
But I guess the problem then comes in: can we analyze and understand how
Right.
they communicate and so on? So maybe that's but I think that also, and that is a big issue because we want to really analyze these models, and also because we also want to interact with AIs. Not only it's not the word is not the word that we imagine is not AI between AI and AI, but interacting with AI and humans.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we do need to put more emphasis or thoughts on understanding these communications as well.
Do you think we could see AI systems at some point where they actually interact with humans during training? I'm personally not aware of any work like that, although maybe it's out there somewhere.
I
mean, it kills reproducibility, but
right.
there's.
I tried it before.
Hold on one sec. Actually, it doesn't totally kill reproducibility, because if you imagine like what social scientists do, they do stuff where there are humans in the loop. But what were you saying?
Well, if like at that point we'll clearly see whether it works or not. But
But
what
you're saying you tried it?
no, I try to do research along that line of the research.
Yeah.
Where you and it becomes then the few things that become in the settings are first it has to be online settings.
Yeah.
It has to be active and interactive learning settings.
Yeah.
And I find that one of the there are a few the difficult challenges that online learning and tends to be very hard compared to batch learning.
Yeah.
Another thing is that usually the data that we get is non-IID.
Right, right.
And the third thing I find is that
I mean, it also takes a long time to get the feedback from a person, at least relative to how quickly a neural net makes updates. But you could imagine like an experience replay thing too.
yeah. So those type of experience replay are definitely necessary because the third thing that I was going to point out is that because your networks are iterative update procedure,
Yeah.
you see it many times. But when you do interactive or active learning, humans
Yeah.
only provide like only a certain amount of labels. We get tired of it very fast.
Right.
So that was another hard thing. Yeah, that I found.
I see. So that's the end of the questions that I have. Is there anything in particular that you'd also like to discuss, or I guess we could conclude by,
Mhm.
yeah, I guess if people are interested in learning more about this, is there anything in particular you'd recommend they look at?
Well, yes, I wrote a blog about recent evolution of Q&A data,
Mm.
and through like looking at the Q&A data sets, I see like we can see how it progresses. Q&A, at least for Q&A field progresses. So that'll
Yeah,
be an interesting thing. If you find this video interesting, then you can check that out.
yeah.
Also, I'll say follow AI Founded at Twitter and Facebook, hashtag AIF Unit. So thank you.
I guess I'll do that now. So thanks for taking the time to answer these questions. Hopefully this is something that's going to be an informative thing for people to look at if they're interested in learning about your startup, but also if they're interested in NLP and reinforcement learning research.
Yeah, this interview is like really great for me. Thank you, Alex, for interviewing me.
All right.
Yeah,
Have a good day. Thanks.
thanks.
Bye.
Bye.